next talk is going to be from Kim Ying, who's a software engineer on MakeCode. And Kim, take it away.
Hello all, and thanks for joining my talk today about onboarding new users. My name is Kim Ying, and I've been part of the Microsoft MakeCode team full-time for about 6 months. In this talk, I'll give a brief overview of MakeCode, and then I'll discuss the challenge of onboarding new users to a block-based coding editor. I'll walk you through how we used to onboard users, then show our new onboarding tour feature, along with some implementation details and user feedback, and I'll conclude with our future plans to improve onboarding. If you aren't familiar, MakeCode, which is built on Blockly, is a free open source platform for computer science learning. You can reach our homepage at makecode.com. You can use MakeCode to build games on arcade, code devices like the microbit, and mod Minecraft. Onboarding. Why is onboarding so important? Computer science is already scary for a lot of kids, so we wanted to create a better experience for students new to block coding. And when done effectively, onboarding can also increase user retention, whether the user is a kid coding for fun at home or a teacher exploring educational tools for their classroom. This is one of our editors, specifically our editor for programming the microbit. Now, if you've seen block-based coding environments before, this may look relatively familiar. You've got your coding workspace, toolbox full of blocks, and an output area, or what we call a simulator. But for those that are new to coding, the editor can be completely overwhelming. There are so many other things going on. You can go back to the home page, toggle for programming in blocks, JavaScript, or Python, share your project, interact with the simulator toolbar, download hardware, connect your microbit, name your project and save it on your computer, link your project to GitHub, search for blocks, open Advanced for more categories and extensions, right-click on a block for more options, right-click on the workspace for more options, and finally, undo, redo, and zoom in and out of the workspace. If we wanted to point everything out to a new user, this is what it would look like. And of course, this isn't even everything. But to build out our editor tour, we chose a small handful of these elements to show. For our editor tour feature, we followed the UX principle of progressive disclosure, as described by the Nielsen-Norman group. We present only the most essential features first, and then as the user becomes more familiar, we can gradually introduce them to more features. And now I'll demo our editor tour for the microbit. For now, the tour is self-initiated. Users need to go to the Help menu to start the tour. And you'll see we only highlight the most important features instead of trying to point everything out. We call the pop-ups teaching bubbles. If you could click on the little help icon on the top right.
Yep.
There you go.
Asking for help.
And then click on the tour. That's going to start the tour. All right. And it says, new here, take a tour of the editor. Go ahead to next. Then it shows the microbit simulator. See what your code looks like running on a microbit. Next. And here's the toolbox. And it tells you that you can drag out blocks from the toolbox categories. Next. Then it shows the workspace and tells you that you can click snap blocks of code together. Next. And here's the share link where you can get a link to share your project with others. Next. And this is where you can download your program to your microbit. Next. And finally, we congratulate the user for finishing the tour with some fun confetti. And that's it. To implement the tour, I created a React component called a teaching bubble with several props, the most important ones being next, title, description, target query, and location. The title and description are the textual content on the bubble, and the target query is how we identify the DOM element that we want to highlight. So that's a query selector string. For instance, this one in the example is .blockly toolbox div. And the location is the relative location of the teaching bubble to the highlighted element. In this case, it's to the right. Next. To create the highlight effect, we create a transparent element, which is a copy of the target DOM element's bounding rectangle. Next. Oh, actually, I think you got it already. Then we use the CSS box shadow property to create that gray shadow over the rest of the window. The step animations were done using the CSS transition property and transition duration. And these are just a few of the implementation details. This code is all open source, and I'd be happy to point you to the relevant pull requests if you'd like to see the full implementation. Next slide. User testing. Next slide. We conducted user testing in 7th and 8th grade classes. Next, all students understood how to navigate through the tour, and most of them seemed to have read the steps and understood the different parts of the editor. They liked the confetti at the end and the highlight effect. They also liked that the tour was short and simple. The biggest area for improvement was for discoverability. So while a few students found the tour after we prompted them to look for one, many suggested that the tour automatically start for new people or make it easier to find. They suggested putting it at the top level of the navigation bar or adding color or animations to direct people's attention to the tour. It's also important to note that there were a couple students who either clicked through the tour quickly or dismissed it entirely. And this is okay, as some students will prefer to discover things on their own, but we should also make sure that students are aware of where they can start the tour if they decide they need help later. Next slide. Future plans. Next slide. We realize the self-initiated tour may not be the best approach, since new users will still need to be directed there. In the future, we plan to detect new users and prompt them to start the tour. We would also show them how they could restart the tour in the help menu if they want to take it later. Similarly, we'll have certain user actions trigger additional tours or one-off teaching bubbles. For example, we might point out the zoom out and zoom in buttons when a user reaches a certain number of blocks in the workspace, which might help them navigate their code. Next. Currently, the interface becomes static during the tour, and the user can only interact with the teaching bubbles. In the future, we'd like to make the steps interactive, potentially leading users to complete a Hello World type program. For example, a step would introduce the user to the toolbox and then prompt them to drag out a specific block. In the next step, it would highlight the workspace and have them snap blocks of code together. Next. Lastly, we're considering awarding digital badges to users who complete different tours. We currently offer badges in our arcade editor for completing skill maps, and they can offer some extra motivation and delight to users. And these badges show up in the user's profile. Next slide. Any questions? Thanks for listening.
Very cool. So you did user testing, and it seems like kids liked it. I'm curious if you're also gathering metrics on, like, does it change anything for them? Do they make bigger projects? Do they use more features after having gone through the onboarding?
Great question. So we have telemetry right now for getting ticks for like them going through the tour, next and back, and whether they click out of it. But right now, this is only in beta, so we don't have a ton of data yet. But that's definitely something we're planning to look at.
Cool. Thank you.
Neil?
I'd be interested to know whether your telemetry matches your user testing, because in our user testing of the same thing in Blockly Games, virtually everybody closes the bubble. And yeah. They will be absolutely desperate to get, well, we got rid of the X to get rid of the bubble, and they would try everything. They'd poke the screen, they'd drag, they'd reload the page. They would be absolutely desperate to get rid of it. And finally, in exasperation, they'd read it. Last resort. I don't know if you've seen that sort of behavior, but that was the norm when we were looking at it.
Yeah, I could see the user testing being potentially different because we are right there monitoring them. So there may be some different behavior, but we did see some students like click through really quickly. And so we do expect that there may be some behavior like that in the real world scenario, but it's definitely something that we're going to look into with the telemetry ticks. Yeah, Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, we finally got rid of the X, and it's now the #1 piece of user feedback that the students want to close these things. But of course, if you do that, they can't use the product.
Yeah, thanks.
Catch 22. Rachel?
So thank you for that talk. It's one of the things where I've seen different attempts at doing this from many different things, many different block-based coding things. So I have the fine folks from Scratch up here nodding and nodding and nodding. I have the LOK folks nodding. Aaron Dodson, who actually implemented something similar for CS first, so layered over Scratch, is nodding along. We've actually, I know last year or the year before, we had a talk from Jonty Small from someone who has worked with him on how they do onboarding, but their onboarding is for adults, and so they're able to like be a little more, add more layers into a single thing. But I know this is one of those outstanding problems. Neil obviously alluded to it as well for Blockly games, where people really want it to go away, and then if you don't have it for them, they immediately respond with like, "Why didn't you tell me how to use the thing?"
Right.
Yeah. So it's cool to see. It's cool to see how you guys are approaching it, and also I would love to see if anyone ever finds a way to do it where you do not simultaneously have the feedback make it go away and why didn't you put it in my face.
Yes, good point. Thanks.